Seneca's advice for every overthinker. Stoicism. Every overthinker believes one thing. If I think about it long enough, I'll finally feel at peace. It sounds reasonable. It even feels responsible. After all, careful people think before they act. Wise people consider different possibilities. Thoughtfulness seems like a strength, so the mind quietly reaches a dangerous conclusion. The answer must be one more thought away. But something strange begins to happen. The more you think, the less certain you become. One possibility becomes 2. 2 become 10. 10 become 100. Every answer creates another question. Every conclusion creates another doubt. Instead of moving closer to peace, you slowly move farther away from it. The Stoics noticed this long before psychology ever existed. They realized that the human mind has an extraordinary ability. It can create possibilities that reality has never created. It can invent conversations that never happen, conflicts that never begin, failures that never arrive, rejections that never occur. Then it suffers as though every one of them were already real. Most people believe they are searching for answers. The Stoics believed they were searching for something else. Certainty. The mind whispers, "Once I know exactly what will happen, then I'll finally relax." But life has never made that promise. Tomorrow has never arrived with guarantees. No relationship comes with certainty. No decision arrives without risk. No future unfolds exactly as imagined. The search continues, not because the answer is missing, because certainty itself does not exist. Imagine a traveler standing before a forest. Instead of taking the first step, he spends years trying to discover every path, every obstacle, every possible danger, every possible destination. He studies maps, draws new maps, questions every map. Eventually, he knows everything about the journey, except what it feels like to actually walk it. That is what the mind quietly does. It mistakes preparation for progress. It mistakes analysis for movement. It mistakes thinking for living. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that wisdom is not found by endlessly multiplying thoughts, but by allowing reason to guide the mind instead of fear. A restless mind does not become peaceful because it has considered every possibility. It becomes peaceful when it learns that no amount of thinking can eliminate the uncertainty built into life. This changes everything, because the goal is no longer to find the perfect answer. The goal becomes becoming the kind of man who no longer requires perfect certainty before he can live wisely. That journey begins with recognizing one of the greatest illusions the mind ever creates: the belief that just one more thought will finally be enough. The illusion of one more thought. There is a promise the mind keeps making. It sounds convincing every single time. Just think about it a little longer. One more scenario, one more possibility. Then you'll know what to do. Most people believe that promise, not because they are weak, because it feels logical. After all, careful decisions require careful thinking. So the mind quietly convinces itself that more thinking must always produce more clarity. The Stoics discovered something surprising. Beyond a certain point, thinking stops creating clarity. It begins creating confusion. Imagine standing before a mirror. At first you see yourself clearly. Then you place another mirror beside it. Now you see 2 reflections. Then another. And another. Soon, every reflection begins reflecting another reflection. Nothing new has appeared, only more versions of the same image. That is exactly what happens inside the mind. The first thought asks, "What should I do?" The second asks, "But what if I'm wrong?" The third replies, Maybe there's a better option. Then another voice appears. Have you considered this possibility? Then another. What if you regret your decision? Hours pass. Nothing changes, except exhaustion. The Stoics understood that the human mind rarely recognizes when useful thinking has ended. It keeps searching. Not because the answer is still missing, because it has become addicted to the search itself. Think about how often this happens. You rewrite the same message 5 times. You replay yesterday's conversation 20 times. You compare every possible decision. You imagine every possible outcome. Yet the final decision feels no easier than it did in the beginning. The extra thinking did not create wisdom. It created distance from action. This is why overthinking feels strangely productive. You remain busy. Your mind works constantly. You feel as though you are solving something. Yet nothing in your actual life moves forward. The Stoics believed there is a profound difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection moves you toward action. Rumination moves you away from it. One creates progress. The other creates paralysis. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that reason exists to guide action, not to imprison the mind in endless deliberation. Wisdom is measured by the quality of judgment, not by the quantity of thoughts. A mind that never stops examining every possibility eventually loses the ability to choose any of them. Imagine an archer preparing to release an arrow. He checks the wind. He studies the target. He steadies his breath. Then he releases. If he continues aiming forever, the arrow never leaves the bow. Preparation quietly becomes avoidance. Many lives unfold the same way. People wait for complete certainty, complete confidence, complete understanding. Meanwhile, life continues without them. The Stoic chooses differently. He thinks carefully. Then he accepts that there comes a moment when another thought adds nothing, only another delay. That realization changes everything, because the greatest obstacle was never a lack of intelligence. It was believing that peace was hiding inside one more thought. And once that illusion disappears, you begin noticing something even more surprising. The mind is not always searching for better answers. Very often, it is trying to create the one thing no human being has ever possessed: complete control. The mind confuses thinking with control. There is a reason the mind refuses to stop thinking. It believes thinking creates control. The more possibilities it analyzes, the safer it feels. The more outcomes it predicts, the more prepared it believes it becomes. The more questions it asks, the more certain it expects to feel. The Stoics saw through that illusion. They understood that the mind often mistakes activity for progress. Imagine holding a compass during a storm. Instead of choosing a direction, you keep spinning it in your hand, again and again and again. The compass never becomes clearer. The movement only makes it harder to read. The mind behaves the same way. Constant thinking creates the feeling of control, not actual control. Think about the moments when your thoughts become loudest: before an important conversation, before making a difficult decision, before asking someone an honest question, before taking a meaningful risk. The mind says, think a little longer, prepare a little more. Imagine every possible outcome. It sounds responsible. But sometimes, it is simply fear wearing the mask of intelligence, because uncertainty is uncomfortable. And thinking gives us the comforting illusion that we are doing something about it. The Stoics believed there is a profound difference between preparing for reality and trying to eliminate uncertainty altogether. Preparation is wise. The search for absolute certainty is endless. Imagine a sailor waiting for the perfect weather before leaving the harbor. Every morning he studies the sky. The wind changes. He waits. Clouds appear. He waits again. Another forecast arrives. Still he waits. Years pass. The ship remains exactly where it began. Safe, perfectly prepared, and completely unused. Many minds live exactly this way. They wait for complete confidence before acting, complete certainty before deciding, complete clarity before moving. Life never offers any of them. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that wisdom does not consist in eliminating every uncertainty before acting. It consists in strengthening reason so that uncertainty no longer rules the mind. The wise person prepares carefully, then accepts that fortune will always remain beyond complete control. That changes the question completely. Instead of asking, "How can I control everything that might happen?" the Stoic asks, "How can I become the kind of man who can handle whatever happens?" Those are entirely different pursuits. One tries to control life, the other develops character. One creates endless anxiety, the other creates quiet confidence. Because life has never rewarded the man who predicted every possibility. It rewards the man who remained steady when unexpected possibilities appeared. That is why the Stoics never chased perfect certainty. They cultivated resilience. They trusted their judgment more than their predictions. They trusted their principles more than their plans. Little by little, the need to control every outcome began disappearing. Not because life became more predictable, because they became stronger than unpredictability itself. And once the mind stops confusing thinking with control, it begins noticing another habit it has practiced for years. It keeps asking questions that were never meant to have final answers. Questions that have no finish line. There are questions that move your life forward. Then there are questions that quietly keep your life standing still. The difficult part is that they often sound exactly the same. The mind begins with a simple thought. What if this goes wrong? Before long, another question appears. But what if it goes right? Then another. What if there's a better option? Then another. What if I regret my decision? Then another. What if I haven't thought about everything yet? The questions never truly end, because they were never designed to end. The Stoics understood something remarkably subtle. Some questions are not searching for answers. They are searching for permission to keep thinking. Imagine standing in a hallway filled with doors. You open the first one. Inside, there is another hallway. With more doors, you open another. Again, another hallway appears. No matter how many doors you open, you never reach the outside. That is what the mind does when it begins chasing endless questions. Every answer immediately creates another possibility. Every possibility creates another doubt. Every doubt creates another question. The destination quietly disappears. Most people believe they are becoming more careful. In reality, they are becoming more trapped. Think about how often the mind speaks this language. Maybe, suppose, what if, should I? None of those questions is dangerous by itself. The danger appears when they become your permanent home. Because a life built entirely upon hypothetical questions eventually loses contact with reality. Reality only asks one thing. What will you do now? The Stoics return to that question again and again, not because they ignored uncertainty, because they refused to build their lives upon imagination. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that reason exists to guide us toward wise action, not endless speculation. The wise person recognizes that some questions illuminate the path ahead, while others simply keep the mind wandering in circles. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. Imagine a man standing at the edge of a river. He wants to cross. Instead of taking the first step, he begins asking questions. What if the water becomes deeper? What if I lose my balance? What if another crossing is safer? What if I should wait until tomorrow? Hours pass. The river remains exactly the same. Only the man has become more exhausted. The questions created movement inside his mind, but nowhere else. That is why the Stoics measured wisdom differently. Not by the number of questions a person could ask, by the number of unnecessary questions he had learned to release. Because not every thought deserves another thought. Not every doubt deserves another investigation. Not every uncertainty deserves another hour of analysis. Some questions are simply invitations to postpone living. The Stoic quietly declines the invitation. He accepts that some answers only appear after action begins, not before. And that realization demands something most people spend their lives avoiding: the courage to stop asking and start moving. The courage to leave questions unanswered. Most people believe wisdom means having all the answers. The Stoics believed wisdom begins when you stop demanding them. There is a quiet courage in saying, "I do not know," not because you have given up, because you have accepted something reality has always been trying to teach you. Some questions cannot be answered by thinking. They can only be answered by living. Imagine standing at the edge of a road that disappears into the horizon. You refuse to take the first step until you can see the entire journey. You wait. You study. You calculate. You imagine every possible turn. But the road never reveals itself. Not because it is hiding, because roads are revealed by walking. Life works the same way. The mind wants certainty before action. Reality offers clarity through action. That is the lesson the Stoics never stopped repeating. Most of the questions that torment us cannot be solved inside the imagination. Will this relationship work? Will I succeed? Will I regret this decision? What if I fail? The mind demands an answer. Life remains silent. Not because life is cruel, because those answers do not exist yet. They are waiting inside the choices you have not made. This is why the Stoic does something that feels almost impossible to the overthinking mind. He leaves certain questions unanswered, not forever. For now. Because he understands that delaying action does not create certainty. It only postpones experience. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that the wise person does not become a prisoner of endless deliberation. Once reason has examined the situation honestly, he accepts that there comes a point where further thinking no longer serves wisdom. It serves hesitation. From that moment forward, courage must replace speculation. Think about learning to swim. You can read every book ever written, study every technique, watch every demonstration, imagine every movement. Yet none of that teaches your body what the water teaches in a single moment. Some forms of knowledge only exist on the other side of action. The same is true for life. Some decisions only become clear after they are made. Some strengths only appear after they are tested. Some confidence only grows after uncertainty has already been faced. The overthinking mind finds this terrifying. The Stoic finds it liberating because he no longer expects life to provide guarantees before he moves. He trusts something far more reliable, his character. He knows that even if the outcome is difficult, he will still respond with wisdom. Even if the path changes, he will adapt. Even if the future surprises him, his principles remain the same. That is why courage is not the absence of unanswered questions. It is the willingness to continue despite them. The Stoic eventually reaches a moment when he quietly says, "I have thought enough. Now, It is time to live. That sentence ends a battle many people fight for years, because peace is rarely found in the answer to every question. It is found in knowing which questions no longer deserve your time. And once you learn to leave some questions unanswered, you discover another remarkable habit. You stop treating every thought as though it deserves your attention. Stop negotiating with every thought. Every thought arrives with the same confidence. It sounds convincing, urgent, important, as though it deserves your immediate attention. Most people believe it does. The Stoics did not. They understood that the mind produces thoughts the way the heart produces heartbeats, constantly, automatically, without asking whether every one of them deserves to shape your life. Imagine sitting inside your home on a quiet evening. Someone knocks at the door. You look outside. It is a stranger. Would you immediately invite him inside? Would you hand him the keys to your house? Would you allow him to rearrange your furniture and decide how you should live? Of course not. You would first ask, "Who are you?" The Stoics believed every thought deserved the same question. Yet most people never ask it. A thought appears. "I'm going to fail." The door opens. Another thought arrives. "They're judging me." The door opens again. Then another. "I should have done something differently." Again. The door opens. By the end of the day, the mind is crowded with visitors that were never invited. The Stoics refused to live that way. They understood that a thought is not a command. It is not a prophecy. It is not reality. It is merely a mental event asking for your attention. Nothing more. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that the wise person does not surrender immediately to every impression that enters the mind. Before accepting it as true, he pauses, examines it through reason, and decides whether it deserves his agreement. Wisdom begins not with believing every thought, but with evaluating every thought. Think about how much suffering begins with unquestioned assumptions. One criticism becomes, "I'm not good enough." One delayed reply becomes, "They must be upset with me." One mistake becomes, "Everything is ruined." The event lasts a moment. The conversation with the thought lasts for days. That conversation is optional. The Stoics practiced a remarkable discipline. Instead of arguing with every thought, they simply refused to negotiate with thoughts that had nothing useful to offer. When fear knocked, they asked, "Is this preparing me for reality, or only inventing another story?" When regret appeared, they asked, "Can this change the past, or only steal the present?" When doubt arrived, they asked, "Is this guiding wiser action, or delaying it?" Those questions quietly changed everything. Because attention is valuable. Every minute spent debating an imaginary problem is a minute no longer available for living a real life. Imagine a king sitting upon his throne. Every stranger enters the palace demanding an audience. If he speaks with every visitor, he will govern nothing. A wise ruler chooses carefully. The Stoics believed your attention should be governed the same way. Not every thought deserves an audience. Not every fear deserves a discussion. Not every possibility deserves another hour of your life. The strongest minds are not the ones that silence every thought. They are the ones that recognize which thoughts deserve to stay, and which ones should quietly leave without ever being entertained. That simple habit creates extraordinary peace, because the mind gradually learns something it has forgotten. It is no longer in charge. Reason is. And once reason becomes stronger than the constant demand for certainty, you begin trusting something far more reliable than perfect answers. You begin trusting your own character. Trust your character more than your certainty. Every overthinker believes certainty creates confidence. The Stoics believed character creates confidence. Those are two completely different foundations. Certainty depends on the future. Character depends on you. One is fragile. The other cannot be taken away. Imagine two men standing before the same unknown path. The first refuses to move. He says, "I'll walk when I know exactly what will happen." The second quietly says, "I don't know what will happen, but I know who I will be when it does." That is the difference between certainty and character. One trusts predictions, the other trusts principles. Most people spend their lives trying to predict the future because they secretly believe prediction creates safety. The Stoics knew something much deeper. No prediction has ever prevented uncertainty, but strong character has carried countless people through it. Think about every difficult moment you have survived. Did you survive because you knew exactly what was going to happen? Or because, somehow, you found the strength to respond when it finally did? The answer reveals something extraordinary. Your life has never been protected by certainty. It has been protected by your ability to adapt. The Stoics deliberately cultivated that ability. Instead of asking, "How can I eliminate uncertainty?" they asked, "How can I become wiser than uncertainty?" That single question changes the direction of an entire life, because uncertainty immediately loses part of its power. It no longer becomes an enemy. It becomes an opportunity to practice courage, to practice patience, to practice judgment, to practice self-control. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that the wise person does not place his confidence in favorable circumstances or perfect forecasts. His confidence rests in a disciplined character capable of meeting fortune with reason, regardless of what tomorrow brings. Imagine an ancient oak tree standing through countless seasons. It has endured violent storms, long winters, relentless winds. It never knew exactly when the next storm would arrive. It simply continued growing stronger. The Stoics believed a man should become like that tree, not because storms disappear, because strength quietly grows with every storm endured. That is why the overthinking mind remains exhausted. It keeps trying to become stronger by predicting life. The Stoic becomes stronger by preparing himself instead. One asks, "What if everything goes wrong?" The other asks, "If something goes wrong, what kind of man will I choose to be?" The first question produces anxiety. The second produces resilience. One searches for guarantees. The other develops character. Little by little, the need for certainty begins fading. Not because life becomes easier, because your confidence no longer depends on knowing the future. It depends on knowing yourself. That is the quiet freedom Seneca wanted every person to discover. When your character becomes stronger than your uncertainty, the future loses its ability to intimidate you. And when that happens, you arrive at the final lesson, the place where every search for certainty finally comes to an end, the place where lasting peace quietly begins. Peace begins where control ends. Every overthinker believes peace waits at the end of certainty. The Stoics believed peace begins at the end of control. Those ideas cannot exist together. One says, "When I know enough, when I've prepared enough, when I've imagined every possibility, then I'll finally relax." The other quietly says, "Life was never asking you to control everything. It was asking you to govern yourself." That changes the entire purpose of thinking. The goal is no longer to eliminate uncertainty. The goal is to become the kind of man who remains steady in its presence. Imagine standing beside the ocean. You cannot command the waves. You cannot negotiate with the tide. You cannot ask the wind to change direction. You can only learn how to stand. The Stoics believed life works exactly the same way. Most suffering begins when we try to control what was never ours. Other people's opinions, the future, chance, fortune, time, the past. The overthinking mind quietly wages war against all of them. Every day, every hour, every thought. The Stoic lays down his weapons, not because he has become passive, because he has become wise. He understands that peace is not created by controlling life. It is created by ending the fight against reality. Seneca understood this deeply. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that the wise person does not exhaust himself demanding certainty from a world that has never promised it. Instead, he cultivates a mind governed by reason, accepting that while external events remain uncertain, his own character can remain constant. Think about how much energy disappears every day trying to control things that cannot be controlled, trying to predict every conversation, trying to prevent every disappointment, trying to guarantee every outcome, trying to eliminate every possibility of failure. The mind becomes tired, not because life is difficult, because it keeps fighting battles that can never be won. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase across an entire country. After hours of exhaustion, someone quietly asks, "Why are you carrying it?" You stop, look down, and realize you could have placed it on the ground at any moment. Many people carry certainty the same way. They believe they must hold it, protect it, search for it. They never realize they can let it go. The Stoic does something extraordinary. He stops asking, "How can I control tomorrow?" He begins asking, "How can I live wisely today?" That single question transforms the entire direction of his mind, because today can be governed, character can be strengthened, virtue can be practiced, reason can be chosen. Tomorrow cannot. This is the quiet freedom that overthinking can never discover on its own. Not because the future becomes predictable, because the future no longer determines your peace. Your peace begins depending on something much stronger, your ability to meet whatever comes with wisdom. That is why the Stoics never searched for a life without uncertainty. They searched for a character that uncertainty could not break. Little by little, the need to know everything disappears. The need to control everything disappears. The need to solve every imaginary future disappears. What remains is something the overthinking mind has been searching for all along. Not certainty. Peace. Real peace. The kind that arrives the moment you stop demanding guarantees from life and start trusting the man you have become. That is the advice Seneca leaves every overthinker. Do not spend your life trying to control tomorrow. Become the kind of person who can meet tomorrow, whatever it brings. Tomorrow, your mind will offer you another question, another possibility, another reason to wait, another scenario to analyze, another conversation to replay, another future to predict. It will sound convincing. It always does. It will whisper, "Just think a little longer. One more possibility. One more answer. Then you'll finally feel at peace." Pause for a moment. How many times has your mind made that promise? And how many times has it actually kept it? The Stoics understood something extraordinary. The mind is capable of producing an endless number of questions. Life is not. Life asks only one. How will you live today? That is why Seneca never tried to eliminate thought. He tried to restore its proper place. Thinking is a remarkable servant. It becomes a terrible master. Reason exists to guide action, not to imprison you inside endless imagination. In Seneca's Letters from a Stoic, paragraph 5, he reminds us that the wise person does not seek absolute certainty before living. Instead, he strengthens his judgment, disciplines his character, and accepts that the future will always contain unknowns. Peace is not found by removing uncertainty. It is found by refusing to let uncertainty govern the mind. Think back to everything you have heard today. The illusion that one more thought will solve everything. The temptation to mistake thinking for control. The courage to leave some questions unanswered. The discipline of refusing to negotiate with every passing thought. The decision to trust your character more than your predictions. The freedom that appears the moment you stop demanding certainty from life. Every lesson points toward the same truth. Your greatest problem was never uncertainty. It was believing you needed certainty before you could live wisely. The Stoics rejected that belief completely. They accepted that tomorrow would always remain unpredictable. People would disappoint them. Plans would change. Fortune would rise and fall. Loss would eventually arrive. None of those things surprised them. What mattered was never controlling events. It was governing themselves. That is the difference between the restless mind and the Stoic mind. The restless mind asks, "What if something goes wrong?" The Stoic asks, "If something goes wrong, will I still act with wisdom?" The restless mind searches for guarantees. The Stoic develops character. The restless mind waits for certainty. The Stoic begins with courage. That is why peace does not arrive when life becomes predictable. It arrives when your character becomes more reliable than your fears. So tomorrow morning, when another anxious thought knocks on the door of your mind, do not ask, "How long should I think about this?" Ask, "Has this thought earned my attention?" If it has, reflect with reason. If it has not, let it pass. Because not every thought deserves your time. Not every fear deserves your belief. Not every possibility deserves your peace. If this lesson helped you see your own mind through the timeless wisdom of Seneca, subscribe to the Discipline Code. Every week, we explore practical Stoic philosophy to help you build self-discipline, emotional resilience, mental clarity, inner peace, and the quiet strength to remain steady in a world that never stops demanding your attention. Until next time, do not spend your life searching for the certainty that tomorrow can never promise. Become the kind of person who no longer needs that promise. Because the strongest mind is not the one that thinks the most. It is the one that knows when thinking has already done enough.